Hi, I'm Dr. George Yancey. Let's share some paradigms. And the paradigm I'll share today concerns white, educated progressives and free speech. So, white, educated progressives and free speech. If you understand progressives tend to emphasize rights, the rights of other individuals, and the idea that humans are the highest form of evolution, and thus we give people more rights, more ability to discuss things, to find their own path. Things are better. So does this extend to free speech? I was working with some data from the Baylor Religious Survey, and one of the questions was this: free speech must be limited to combat hate speech and political misinformation. So this is one of the questions that was on there. And I divided the respondents in two groups. The blue line is white educated progressives, and I define this as people with more than a bachelor's degree or more, and score either liberal or very liberal on a 7-point scale. Then all other progressives, all other people who scored either liberal or very liberal on the 7-point scale, be they uneducated progressives or non-white progressives, that's the orange, and the green is everyone else. You can see on the far left column, which is strongly agree, that about 20% of those educated white progressives strongly agree that free speech must be limited. That's almost twice as much as all other progressives. So this is not merely a political ideology difference. You can see as we move to agree that these white educated progressives still are more likely to agree with that statement than all other progressives. And then in the last column, the one on the far right, you can see when I add these together, the agree and disagree, that white educated progressives are more likely to both agree and disagree than all other progressives, and especially more likely than everyone else. So this is not merely because of political ideology. There's something special about white educated progressives that make them particularly unwilling to support free speech. What could that be? That's what I want to talk about. So let's think about this. In spite of their arguments that it's about individualism and rights, white educated progressives are more likely to restrict free speech. There must be something about the uniqueness of being a white educated progressive. First, why am I talking about white? Why does race matter? Well, here's a difference. White progressives tend to be more irreligious than progressives of color. In fact, among African Americans, religious ideology is not as predictive on religiosity as it is among whites. A lot of African Americans who are pretty progressive also have a mooring in their religious tradition. So what makes white progressives unique, and I think the education, it makes it even more intense. It amplifies it, if you will. This tendency to have a more secular mindset with one's political ideology. I think this is the key. You may or may not have seen my video where I discuss the notion of human perfectibility and human depravity. And as a Christian, human depravity should help orient our ways of thinking as opposed to human perfectibility. Human perfectibility goes the way of humanism, that we can create this perfect society because we humans are the highest form of evolution, of thinking, of producing what we need. If this is the case, and you believe that we as humans can create this perfect society, and you have an idea of what that perfect society is, you don't want anyone in the way of creating that perfect society. Thus, debate, a clash of ideas, is less important to you. You know the solution, and now you want to implement that solution. I believe that's a mindset within white educated progressives. And maybe you can see how the education may give more confidence to people believing that they know the way to utopia. So, to create this utopia, if we have to give up some rights along the way, so be it. We can't let what we define as disinformation get in the way of this. We can't let lesser voices get in the way of this. I do believe this is one of the reasons why white educated progressives have a hostility towards, especially white, but conservative Christians in general, because they're in the way to their vision of a utopia. And then you have an elite mentality. And I'm going to bring in some of my discussions on identity politics. You have an elite mentality that plays identity politics. And part of the identity politics is this notion that there are oppressed and oppressors, there are victims and victimizers, and they envision themselves on the side of the victims, and therefore, losing is not an option. So in this mentality, you can't lose your political struggle. If you do, these poor victims will be re-victimized or harmed. You can't lose a struggle. Therefore, you can't allow opposition to get in the way. This means that if some free speech rights have to go for some period of time so that you can achieve your political victory, so be it. This, I believe, helps to establish why uniquely hostile to free speech is white educated progressives. The notion of perfectibility has its consequences. And I believe one of the reasons why white educated progressives are almost completely opposite of conservative Christians is that the notion of perfectibility versus the notions of depravity. And if you believe you can create perfectibility, those people who say, no, there's depravity and we can't do it, and there's other traditions we have to take into consideration, they're in the way. And I'm not saying that the free speech rights or the restrictions thereof is only aimed at conservative Christians, but I'm saying that this is one of the reasons why I believe white educated progressives orient a lot of what they do around opposing conservative Christians. So that's how you explain the paradox. Yes, freedom for everyone, but there's a paradise that we can't get in the way of. And if we have to at least temporarily suspend rights for a time, so be it. Of course, the problem with this is sometimes what becomes temporary can easily become permanent. Does this share some paradigms for you? Paradigms are thinking about how free speech does not fit in with what should be a philosophy of progressiveness, of evolution of society, of rights, and yet it doesn't. The data shows it doesn't, and I'm offering you a reason why that data is the way it is. So this is something to think about. Now, maybe you disagree with me, you think I'm full of it, give a comment. Tell me that. That's fine. Conversation. I'm not against free speech rights. Conversation. Go right ahead. If you like it, then please also comment. Give me a like. If this is the sort of conversations you like to hear about and perhaps engage in, let's build a community on this. Let's have people who we can come who can talk about these issues. So subscribe. More content will be delivered as I create it. I hope you've enjoyed this. And if you have, please come back or check out some of my other videos and come be with me while we shatter some more paradigms.